Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Fearless's College Prep panel. We want to introduce you to our amazing Fearless mentors that are so generous with their time this afternoon, and they are here to give you the most candid college prep advice. So we want everybody that's in attendance to be unabashed and ask every single question possible on how you're thinking about college prep, even if it's, anxieties that you have, or even the nitty grittiest questions. Our panelists are here to offer their experiences and share their stories and, everything that they can help you as you're thinking about college and beyond. So with that said, I'd love to introduce our panelists today. For me, my lower left-hand corner, we have Kuran Malhotra. Kuran grew up in Livingston, New Jersey. He's now living in Manhattan. He attended Livingston High School. He is the class of 2020 from Georgetown McDonough School of Business. Kuran's held internships at UBS, Compass Coffee, Intersect Fund, and he is now an analyst at Insight Partners, which is a venture capital growth equity firm. Kuran is a swimmer and a runner. He loves to travel. He's a huge foodie, and he's a sucker for a good cappuccino, which I love, and we've had a debate about that already. The next person on our panel is Emma Marcus. She is from Marlboro, New Jersey. She attended Colts Neck High School. She was the class of 2021 at Keene State College and majored in psychology and Holocaust and genocide studies. Emma has had internships at the Auschwitz Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, based in Kampala, Uganda, during the summer of 2019. She's done some super cool stuff. And currently she's going for a dual master's in trauma counseling and international peace and conflict resolution at Arcadia University. That is so much jam-packed in just that piece. Emma is also pursuing her 200-hour yoga teacher training, loves meditation, hiking, reading, and spending time with her 2 cats and a new puppy. We also have Miranda Sapoznik. She also grew up in Marlboro, New Jersey from Colts Neck High School. Miranda attended University of Maryland, College Park, and was the graduate class of 2021. Miranda's been a legal intern at immigration law firm and a family law practice. She is also one of Fearless's content creators, as well as being a mentor. Miranda loves spending her time exploring new places, be it cities or even in the woods. She enjoys painting, reading, writing, shopping, yoga, and exercising, and night walks. And lastly, we have our very own Nara Cowing. Nara is from New York City. She attended Baruch College Campus High School. She is currently a rising sophomore at Cornell University, class of 2024. And her notable internship is actually Fearless. She is our social media and communications intern. She's also in the communications and public relations school at Cornell. And some of the things that Nara loves is arts and crafts. She's always learning how to make fun homemade drinks like Starbucks style coffee and bubble tea. And she's obsessed with crime shows, which I love too. And she's also our Discord ninja. So with that said, welcome everybody. We're so excited to hear your stories. And I am going to kick this off. And I would like to tell our attendees, please, we're happy for us to unmute your mics and ask questions directly. If you're feeling a little shy, please post your questions on the chat, and I'll make sure to ask the panelists. So with that, I am going to start with the first question. When should, and the questions that have come in. So the first question is, when should I start my college prep? So I'm going to start that question with Kuran. What do you think? When should they start prepping for college as a high schooler?
For sure. And so I'll preface this by saying I also have a little brother who's going through this process right now. He's a rising senior in high school. And so he's been asking me the same sorts of questions. I'd say it's important to start thinking about it kind of as you're starting in high school, and not necessarily think about, what your major should be, or, know what school you want to go to. But as you're thinking about what classes you want to take going into your freshman year, your sophomore year, and eventually your junior and senior year, you want to just start to get a sense of what kind of requirements the colleges that you might want to look at have, and how you can build your class schedule to meet those requirements. And then as you get to later in your sophomore year, maybe earlier in your junior year, I think that's really when I started prepping much more for the college kind of application process, whether with tests and studying for those, or deeper dives into some of the colleges that I might have wanted to apply to, and things like that.
Awesome. And Miranda, any additional thought to that?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Kuran said. Actually, if you tuned into our last sprint, we talked a lot about it. We gave you guys a timeline that you can use to break it down, kind of year by year, what you should be gauging and focusing on. I would say that for your first 2 years, it's a lot more laid back, and you just kind of want to make yourself, in terms of thinking long-term about college, you want to make yourself look marketable. So you want to explore and understand who you are, get involved in your community, try and do as well as you can in school. And then when you age into like your junior year and definitely your senior year, your junior year, you're going to start with like the standardized test stuff and things like that, which is a lot more serious college prep. That's when you're really going to start thinking about it.
Well, we already have an attendee that wants to ask a question, so I'm going to open that up. Savannah, would love for you to ask your question to our panel.
Okay, sure. So I'm applying for this program that offers a college credit for Bottega University if you pay more. And I was wondering, like, I don't want to specifically go to that university, but I know that you can transfer credits, and I'm wondering if it's worth getting transfer credits if you don't want to go to that specific university that you're getting credits for.
I can answer.
Great.
So I also took college classes in high school. Definitely, I would say that it's worth it to try to get credits either from AP, IB, or colleges that you don't want to attend in the future. But the one thing that I would make sure of is schools that you're interested in, doing research to see if they do accept transfer credits, because some schools can be really picky with the kinds of credits they accept and, the requirements of that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great question, Savannah. Thank you. I'll keep monitoring that, and I'm going to go to my next question. Do you guys think applying to early decision or early action gives me a leg up? Emma, do you want to tackle that question?
Sure. So I think that it really depends on you as a person. I think that it's important to kind of measure where you really want to go. If there's one or two schools that you know that these are your top schools and you would have no regrets and they're kind of your dream schools, I say absolutely it gives you a leg up. But I don't think that there's really any pressure or kind of need to apply early decision, early action. Take your time with it. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to answer? Like, do you think it's advantageous for early decision, early action? Miranda?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I didn't end up applying early decision to any schools because I didn't have that one dream school. So it's important to note that if you do apply early decision, you're in a legally binding contract to go to that school. So that's something that you really, really want to consider. And you want to consider the financial aspect of that, because if you're applying early action is non-binding. So I think that if you have the time and you have everything done, you have your SAT score you're happy with your grades, and you want to get your college applications out of the way, do early action. It's great. It's awesome. Do regular decision. Otherwise, like it's no pressure. It gives you a little bit more time to get your tests done, things of this sort. But in terms of early decision, you want to make sure that this is your dream school, and it doesn't matter if you don't get any scholarship or you get into any other school. There's no other factor that could sway you from going there.
Okay, great.
And I think just one more thing to add, I mean, in terms of things like admissions rates and taking more people through an early decision program, a lot of schools do that, but a lot of schools also don't. There are a number of schools that I applied to, and I'm sure that there are tons more out there that they kind of take a similar proportion. So I think it's important to look into that. And maybe if the proportion's similar, it's not worth locking yourself into one school so early if you think it might not be kind of the best fit for you, or maybe you want to see what else you can, what other schools you can get into.
Okay.
I also think that's to add on to that in terms of the proportions, I think that a lot of the numbers are really misleading, especially if you see that a school has a higher acceptance rate for early decision, because there is typically a more competitive applicant pool for early decision. So even if they're taking more people, they're taking them from a more competitive pool. So there might not necessarily be higher chances for you just because there's a higher number of acceptances.
That's a really good point, because there are sort of stats out there that are saying, 35% of our acceptances are early decision, early action. So when you're seeing numbers like that, it kind of prompts you to say, oh my God, I need to do this. Versus, like Kuran and Nara said, taking your time and kind of weighing all of your options, and not necessarily thinking that it's a leg up if you don't apply early. And we have, someone like Emma that actually was even on the latter end of that spectrum, where, all of the college apps and everything were already in, and she decided to kind of apply very late stage and got in where she really wanted to. So again, it is different, but that's a really, really great question. Anybody else that wants to raise their hand and jump in, and I can continue asking your questions as well, but just raise your, oh, here we go. Okay, Annika. Annika's asking, for college, how important are volunteer hours? And if they are important, how many should we have?
I'd love to jump in on this one.
Yes.
My volunteer hours were one of the things that got me accepted into college so late in the game. So it is really important showing that you're giving back to the community. Specific hour-wise, I'm really not sure on that. I think that within, if I'm not wrong, it's been a little while, but I think that within your application form, there will be some sort of hours that are kind of listed for you there. But yeah, it's super important to get involved in your community and start giving back as early as you can, and get as many hours in as you can,
Awesome.
I'll add a little bit to that. So like Dipali said, I went to a business school and they actually didn't have an application requirement for any volunteer hours. But I think it was still super, super important that I did volunteer in my community. And I mean, in talking to the admissions officer after I had gotten in, she said that was one of the things that stood out on my application. And so, I think that's worth noting that even if you're applying to a school or a number of schools that don't say they need volunteer hours, they often like to see that you give back to your community, and it can be something that really sets you apart.
That's great advice. Right. Anybody else? Awesome. All right, good. Attendees, please keep the questions coming. I have a few more. All right, so someone asked, do I need SAT subject tests and AP exams? Which ones should I take? Nara, you want to tackle that one?
Yes. I took a couple SAT subject tests. Typically, schools won't ask for those unless you're applying to a specific program like engineering. I know a lot of schools with engineering programs ask for a math or a science SAT subject test, but definitely do research for the schools you're interested in to see if you need to take those, because most of the time SAT subject tests, I would say, are just really boosting your application if you are really confident in a subject.
Okay, awesome.
In terms of your AP classes and AP tests, you don't need them. I don't think any school requires them, but I did take a nice handful of AP classes in high school and I took the test for them. Some of them I didn't get the credit for, and that's okay. But a lot of them I did, and it ended up really helping me out in terms of breaking up the credits that I'm taking per semester. If I wanted to, like, I could have potentially graduated early depending on how many AP credits I had, like that. So if I know that some of my friends, my high school specifically, and I know that other schools do this too, they had like a program that was linked up with our community college where you could start taking like college classes and get high school credit for it. And then as well as college credit. So it depends on all of those things, but you want to look into like transferability and things like that. But if your school will take it, I highly recommend that you do it because it was a really great opportunity for me to lighten my course load.
Awesome. Okay, great. There's a couple of other questions. I think someone mentioned that SAT subject tests might be canceled. So we'll if that's the case, we'll certainly look those things up and put it as part of our sort of notables in our materials to you. Another really great question that came in, which I thought was really interesting. Do you think I should take easy classes and get a higher GPA or tough classes and risk getting a lower GPA? And how will that affect my college app? I love this question. All of you guys need to answer this question. I'd really love your perspective.
I can start.
Yeah.
So I think, and this is a little bit of a cop out, but I think it's important to do a little bit of both, right? Of course, applying to college, it's important to have a GPA that is strong, and especially depending on where you're applying and how your school calculates GPA, like it can be important to be above a certain like threshold or a certain bar. But I think on the other side, it's important to take classes that are aligned with your interests and that you want to take and that you'll enjoy taking. So for example, I am not a very science oriented person. So like I took a biology CP class my freshman year when pretty much all of my friends were taking like the honors biology class or an AP biology class. And it actually didn't really help my GPA because even though I got an A in the class, because it wasn't an AP class, it was kind of lower, but it allowed me to focus on some of the other classes I was taking, whether it was math or history or some of the other ones. And that I think was more important than getting that extra, 0.05 boost on my GPA, because I think in taking like an AP biology class, which I think would have been a lot more time and a lot more effort and a lot harder for me, I probably would have had to sacrifice some of the time I was spending on some of my other classes. And then on the other side, I also took an AP photo class, which of course was probably a little bit easier, but it was a ton of fun. And I think it was something that stood out when I was applying. It was something I wrote about in my college essays. And it was just something I really enjoyed, which I think is worthwhile.
Yeah, that's great. Emma, what do you think about that question?
Yeah, so I agree. I agree with Kuran. I think it's important to take a healthy mix of both, and especially to take classes that you're passionate about if you get to choose, because no matter if it's easy or difficult, if you're interested in the subject, you're going to try really hard. And that's what counts the most, I think. We talk about in the last sprint, our college prep sprint, about letters of recommendation. And sometimes when you go and you maybe take that risk and you take a little bit more of a challenging course, but you try really hard and you kind of work with your teacher, it could be a really good letter of recommendation from that teacher who says, like this maybe wasn't their best subject, but they worked really hard to get here, which shows a lot more than kind of a number of or the GPA score.
That's a really good point. Awesome. Miranda, what is your take?
I agree, honestly, with everything that's been said. I don't even know if I have too much to contribute. I think that what Emma said specifically, following your interests is something that's really important. And that's something that can shine through in all aspects of your application. You can have it in your letter of recommendation. You can write your essay on it and talking about how this is something that fascinated me. And I wasn't great at it, but I tried really, really hard and I learned a lot. And that kind of work ethic is something that admissions officers that look at your application holistically will really appreciate. And it's honestly a really good characteristic to have generally in an individual. But I think I agree that it's good to take a mix because it allows you to focus on certain things and maybe have a little bit of an easier time in another, and it allows your GPA to really even out to that nice place where you want it to be.
Yeah. Nara, anything else from your
Yeah, 100%. Just to echo that, colleges would much rather see that you're taking a harder class and pushing yourself and maybe getting a lower grade than taking a really easy class where you didn't have to put in any work and getting an A plus.
Yeah.
So they want to see that you are a curious learner and you want to push your limits and, you know, step outside your comfort zone.
And that's and I'm glad you said that particular word, because even when you enter the workforce, that intellectual curiosity is one of those words that you're going to hear from here on out. And if you are one of those individuals that are intellectually curious and you know that you might fail, you might not do well, but you are just curious and you want to learn more, that speaks volumes about not only sort of your character, but your work ethic and so much more in your approach to everything in terms of learning. So that's something that you should definitely keep in mind. We have another question from Mitchell. How many credits do you need to graduate high school and get into college? I think he probably meant, I don't know if you actually need credits to graduate high school, or am I wrong, or am I too old to know if we need credits to graduate college? Nara, you want to take that?
Yeah, so the credits that you need to graduate from your high school really depends on your school and your school district. So that might be a really good question to ask your guidance counselor or your advisor or
Nara?
somebody who can guide you. Colleges, yeah.
Oh, sorry, you just cut out for a minute there. So if you can just repeat your last statement.
Yes, that might be a good question to ask your guidance counselor or somebody else at your school that can guide you through that process. But then colleges typically have a recommended spread of classes that they want you to take. So for example, they might want 3 to 4 years of English classes, 3 or 4 years of math class. Typically schools post that on their admissions pages on their websites. So you can take a look at what they're kind of aiming for you to have in high school.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Another question that's come in is, what is the main thing that colleges look for on an application? And all of you have gotten into different schools, right? So some smaller schools, some larger schools, state schools, you know, all types of schools. So I'd really like to understand, you know, did you guys kind of figure out like, all right, I understand why they selected me, or what, you know, I think Kuran, you said you had a chance to talk to your college admissions person. So why don't we start with you as to, you know, what do you think kind of stood out on that college application for you to get accepted into Georgetown?
Sure. So I think the first thing I'll say is I think it varies, Dipali, as you said, kind of school type to school type, but even within a school, like at Georgetown, there are 4 different colleges. And so, you know, the nursing and health studies school looks for something very different from the business school or the foreign studies school. And so it's really important to, as you're going through the application process, kind of do the research and go through their website, see what they're looking for, but also, you know, talk to students if you go on a tour of the campus and ask them what, you know, they think their school looks for, or ask the admissions officers that you might get to meet, or send them an email even, and just kind of start that conversation, because I think it can be really helpful. In terms of Georgetown and kind of some of the other schools I was applying to, I think it touches on some of the things we've spoken about already, just in terms of striking the right balance, but also showing interest in kind of specific things that you're applying for, or specific subjects that you're passionate about. So for me, for example, you know, going to the business school, some of the things that I was doing in high school were a little bit more business focused, whether it was something like FBLA or like being the treasurer of a club at school, teaching financial literacy courses. So, you know, those kind of while they're not exactly applicable to what I'm doing today or even really what I studied in school, it kind of just showed a little bit of an interest and a passion for what I wanted to study. And, you know, my little sister, for example, is more science oriented. And so she spent a lot of time in high school in a research lab and kind of focusing on the sciences and doing, you know, extra credit biology work and things like that. And so it really is just about showing a demonstrated passion and interest, in my opinion.
Great. Miranda, what did you think in terms of, you know, University of Maryland and why you think you got in?
I think that a lot of schools, I think everything is equally important, to be honest with you. I think that some schools might place more emphasis on GPA and SAT, ACT score just because those are certain benchmarks that they look for. But in addition to that, I think that they look for a holistic applicant. And it's really nice to gear your extracurriculars towards something that you might be studying, but it's also really nice to diversify and explore all of your different interests. In high school and in college, I explored everything. I changed my major. I explored everything that I could possibly do because I wanted to make sure I was making the right decision. I actually wrote my college admissions essay on my indecision and it benefit me and how it spoke to the fact that I'm a multifaceted individual. So I think that make your application representative of who you are. Sell yourself. Look for your strengths, and they'll see them too. I think that I'm not sure why I got into the University of Maryland specifically, but I know that one of my reach schools that I did get into, I didn't think I was going to get in. Like, it was definitely a long shot, but I wrote killer supplementary essays. And I honestly, like, if I look back at it, I think that's what it was. Like, I'm a strong writer, and that's what I chose to exemplify. And I think that they enjoyed it. So see what you're interested in.
So when you say supplementary, so it, you know, you had your sort of college essay prompt, but you decided you're going to submit more than, and that was okay?
Yes. So certain schools ask for supplementary essays.
Okay.
Some of them are required, some of them are optional. I think that I did, the school I'm talking about is Lehigh. I did the required ones and I did the optional ones. This
okay.
I really loved. I got creative with it. A lot of the supplementary essays, they're not even essays. Like, one of mine was like, write a tweet about the school. And like it creates an opportunity that's really unique to show your personality and your character.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and
that's
so
great.
Really different and unique, and that's another way that you can really display who you are, because the admissions person wants to get an understanding of who they're letting into their school.
That's great. Nara, how about you? What do you think kind of set you apart in getting into Cornell?
Yeah, so similar to Kuran, I had a lot of extracurriculars that were in the same vein of communication and media studies. So the main thing that I think made me stand out was I designed this extracurricular course at my school. Since it was a pretty small school, we didn't have a newspaper or any sort of communication classes. So I made a kind of journalism and media club, and then we taught lessons, and I kind of designed curriculum for those lessons, just based on a college class that I had taken in journalism. And we brought, you know, an online publication to my school, which we hadn't had in like a decade, I would say. So
when did you take that online? When did you take that online college class?
So I took that after school in the first semester of my junior year of high school. And that was just at a local college.
Okay.
And I used that curriculum to bring it to my school and to help teach other students.
Very cool. I want to go to Emma, and Emma, we'd love to hear about your experience, because it was not the traditional experience and timeline that most students have. So I would love, you know, for those of you that, you know, maybe like Emma, where they had a harder time in high school and then kind of figuring things out, which is perfectly okay. And look at our Emma now. Emma, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience? Because I'm sure there are other people that can relate to you on this webinar.
Yeah, sure. So I hated high school. We really, me, my family, my best friends, like it was really shaky, you know, like we thought that I might not make it like past my senior year and that like we'd probably just like drop out at some point. So it definitely was not my GPA or my grades that got me into college, and that's okay. My writing skills are really strong. I'm a really strong writer. I applied to only test optional schools, so they also had supplementary essays and writing prompts. And even in the midst of all of my anxieties and struggles and mental health declination throughout high school, I volunteered a lot. Like it gave me solace going out into my community and like giving back when I couldn't really give to myself was huge for me. So that was, again, my volunteer hours, the essays, and I made really good connections with about 3 teachers in my high school. All of my other teachers did not like me. Like I was kind of that kid that just left class all the time and didn't really care. But I found 3 teachers that really believed in me and saw me for the intellectual, open-minded individual that I am. And they wrote me glowing letters of recommendation when I came to them and said that, okay, I'm really late in the game, but I decided that I want to try this whole college thing. And again, like I didn't know what I wanted to major in, and it was a super test run. Like I barely, Miranda knows, Miranda's my bestie. I barely made it out of out of high school. And so when I got to college and I had all of that, like, okay, I'm gonna finally do this, it was really a test run. And so I started out just like taking only classes, like not worrying about gen eds, not worrying about anything. Like I was like, let me just see if I can do this. And I ended up taking only classes that I was interested in, which ended up being both of my majors, psych and Holocaust and genocide studies.
Awesome. Well, that's really great. And that's another thing. Look, I know everybody in the last 18 months with COVID and everything that's been affected around this, even the folks on this panel, right? You guys have been affected in some way in your school or graduations and all of the above because of COVID. And there's been a lot of social and emotional learning loss because what do colleges give you, right? They're giving you knowledge transfer. They're giving you a sense of community and social sort of openness and being able to learn from others and networking. And you're also getting a certification, right? So those are the 3 things that colleges actually offer. And that social piece has really been stunted because of COVID. And you high schoolers are probably feeling that as well. So, do not be so hard on yourself in terms of, these are the things that you don't put undue expectations, and it's okay to kind of step back and take care of yourself from a mental wellness perspective as well. So, those are some of the things that we want to emphasize. Something that Emma said, right? It is so important to find mentors and guides that can help you and support you and encourage you, because if you aren't on sort of that straight path, like you kind of know what you're doing and you kind of have it together and you kind of know the process, if you're feeling a little lost, there's always a way to find guidance and mentorship. And you have 4 people on here that are available to you in that respect. So I just want to point that out. Kind of getting a little bit more real on some of these things. For you guys around the room, what was the hardest part of your application process, in your opinion? Like, what freaked you out? Like, what kept you up at night?
I can talk about this one. I had horrible standardized test anxiety. I did not do great on my ACT like a lot of times. I took it, I think 5 times. I took my ACT 5 times. It
And
didn't.
it's okay to take it multiple times. So for those of you that are taking it 1, 2, 3, 4 times over, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I studied for what felt like ages. It felt torturous. I would do well on my practice test, and I would have panic attacks and start seeing spots and go crazy. Um, and it sucked, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't know too much about test optional schools because Emma was my best friend. Emma is my best friend. And she started looking into this late in the game. So I hadn't given it much thought. I hadn't heard about it because I wasn't communicating with my guidance counselors and things like that as much as I should. I do recommend doing that because, we're great resources and you have great resources at your school as well. So I was really trying to meet a certain benchmark and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I took it, I was just kind of like, whatever. Like,
Yeah,
whatever happens. And it was the best that I scored.
of course. That always happens.
Like, it's really hard because there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves. I was under a lot of pressure from my parents, just being honest. And I think that that's a common pressure that a lot of people feel.
Yeah.
And no matter what, wherever you go, you're gonna learn a lot of the same stuff, guys. Like you're gonna get a great education no matter where you go. It's about what you put into it. So while it is important to score well on those tests, remember it's just a part of your application and you are much more than a number on a piece of paper.
Very good point. Karan, what was the hardest for you? What do you
Yeah. So I think Miranda and Emma both mentioned that they're really strong writers. I am not at all. I mean, for as many essays that I wrote, I don't actually even know that I got much better at it by the end of it. And that was really like, I struggled a lot with the writing portion of it because it's so important to the application, whether or not it's actually really important to their decision or whether or not it's important thereafter, it is a pretty big part of the application process. And I'm just not a really good writer. I have a hard time kind of sitting down and focusing on it. I have a hard time kind of putting my thoughts on paper in kind of that organized, succinct way. And that's okay. And I think that what I learned there was, you don't have to do it by yourself. I went to oftentimes a lot of my English teachers. They were really helpful. I actually went to a number of my teachers too, my math teacher, my Spanish teacher. And not just for, help reading through the essays and reviewing and editing, but even just for ideas and inspiration. Teachers, your parents, your family, your friends, these are people that know you. And, when you're thinking through these prompts, it can be really challenging to say, okay, well, what's one time that I, went through hardship? What's one time that I went above and beyond? And oftentimes some of these people that and that are in your community have seen that, and maybe you didn't even realize it. And so that can be a really, really great way to kind of start to get some inspiration for your essays. And then those are people that might be even able to help you write them and edit them and review them and make sure you're putting your best foot forward.
That's awesome. I'd love to hear from Nara as well, but I had to do a quick plug for Fearless on that note, because in our beta program, we're asking everybody to do a little bit of journaling and be very self-aware. And these are the things that kind of come together for you. And it'll be your aha moment, like, oh my God, I journaled about this. And it was that one moment that I want to talk about, and it could inspire your essay. So I'm glad that we're teaching it, and I'm glad that our beta cohort is taking advantage of it. But these are some of the small things that matter. Nara, what was the hardest for you?
Honestly, I think just the pressure. I felt pretty confident in most areas. I was doing as well as I could do, but just being scared that wasn't going to be enough. And the pressure that I put on myself and that my family put on me, and hoping to live up to expectations. But honestly, again, as everyone's been saying, like, it worked out in the end. And no matter what school you get into, or if you go a different route, not a four-year university, you're going to get a great education. You're going to get great experience. So, looking back on it, it was so worth it. And the stress kind of was not even necessary.
Awesome. Well, there's a couple more questions around, that I want to get to, but we do have something in our Q&A. by an anonymous attendee. How do you financially prepare for college when you don't currently have a lot of money in a college account? So who wants to tackle that one? Y'all, Kuran?
I can start a little bit there. So I think there are a few things that come to mind. First is, as you're starting to look at colleges, I think that's a really important piece to note, because a lot of colleges give scholarship money. And oftentimes it'll be, maybe a couple $1,000s towards either books or your tuition, or housing or whatnot, or it can even be all the way up to kind of a full paid ride at college. And that can often include the books and everything that comes along with it too. And so as you're looking at colleges, I think that's something that's really important to consider. And oftentimes some schools will even have like, okay, if you get X test score, or if you write X essay, or they have a little bit more kind of clear-cut benchmarks for what gets you a scholarship than they do the actual application process. And I think the other thing that's important here is, I think actually Miranda had mentioned this initially, but if that's something that you're thinking about, I think maybe think about that as you're looking at early decision, early application, because as Miranda said, like that can often lock you in. And so if you can't necessarily make a commitment to a school without understanding the financial piece, be careful when you're applying early decision, because oftentimes you do get really locked in and they may or may not provide you kind of the scholarship money or the financial aid that you need.
Great. All right, a couple of more questions on, in your first month of college, did you feel that high school prepared you enough to tackle college? And if not, what could have been done better?
I can talk on this a little bit. I don't, college is very different, and it's not necessarily even the course load, which the course load is, depending on the classes that you're taking your first semester, know that that is a serious adjustment period. My worst semester GPA was my first semester of college because of the adjustment. I don't know what could have been done differently necessarily in high school. I know that going back to it, I made my schedule at orientation. I probably would have tried to pick a few easier classes, just to kick it off, get acclimated. The other thing that made it a bit more of a struggle is you're at school and now all of a sudden you have this endless freedom that you can use however you want. You have a whole community of friends. You have so much going on, so much to do. And it's hard to really keep your head on perfectly straight and keep going in that direction that you want to go when there's so many other distractions. That was something that that I think hurt my GPA. I think it's going into it, you just have to tell yourself that you need to find that balance and still remembering to prioritize your grades, because I will tell you that I wish that I worked a little bit harder that first semester, because I had to work really, really hard after that to get my grades where I wanted them to be. And I always think back to it and I'm like, oh, if only I knew. But in the same token, like, you can work yourself up. I did. I was very happy with where I ended, and everyone has that adjustment. Like college is hard. It's a new experience, and you should be able to experience all the fun things that you want. So no, it's not the end of the world, but know that it's definitely time management and balance and prioritizing what's important to you is something that's going to be very important. And that's something that maybe you didn't get to experience as much in high school.
Yeah. Well, I want all of you guys to answer this. Emma, I'm really curious because of your experience in high school. Like, what did you think about, first few months of college?
I don't think that high school could have ever prepared me for college. And I say that in like the best way possible, because like I hated high school, and I'll say it like I'll just keep saying it because it's just so true. but I loved college, and it wasn't the socialization, and it wasn't even necessary. Well, it was the freedom, but it was the freedom to choose, and it was the freedom to learn what I was deeply passionate about, what I feel like kind of like my purpose is. I was able to channel that all into my education, and I excelled, like I almost failed out of high school, which is nearly impossible to do. But I made Dean's List almost actually I think only my first semester was the only time I didn't make Dean's List in college, because it is that adjustment. But I mean, every other semester, like I excelled, and it was honestly, I don't think I would have wanted high school to do anything different. I think it was perfect how it was. And I just kind of needed to step into my own and be given that choice to be free and choose what I want to do and what I want to learn. And I
Yeah.
accept.
Good for you. Kuran, what about you?
Yeah, so I'll actually talk a little bit more, less on the academic side, more on kind of the social side. I think
Yeah.
something that I've seen a lot, especially kind of my town is kind of a smaller town. A lot of the people that I knew in high school I'd known since first grade when I moved to town. And going to DC to go to college, I didn't know anyone. And so it was a huge change, because all of a sudden you're in this new place with so many new people. And even kind of going into high school, right? There were more new people there, but I still had all of my friends from middle school. And so I think it's important to recognize that, as you're getting to college, like it is a new place and you don't need to have friends on day one of college. And that's something that I struggled with. I think that's something that a lot of people I know have struggled with, where, they felt like, okay, why have I not made best friends for the rest of my life? It's September 30th. And, I did become really good friends with some of the people on my floor my freshman year. I became good friends with a lot of the people I met in classes. And, some of those people I'm still friends with, some of them I'm not. And, that's okay too, right? You might not be friends with the same people. Actually, more likely than not, you won't be friends with the same people by the end of your college experience than you were at the beginning of your college experience. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to kind of be best friends with everyone around you. It's okay to take time to yourself if you don't want to kind of go out with everyone on a Friday night or a Saturday night or a Thursday night. It's okay to do those things. It's okay to kind of take it slowly, and it'll work out in the end.
That's an awesome point. Now, look, I'm a few years ahead of Kuran. I will not name my age or state my age, but I can tell you right now, I went to a 30,000 person University of Colorado. It was huge. I probably keep in touch with one person, and even that is like years apart, and we'll pick up where we left off. Now, some of you may be lucky and make lifelong friends, but like Kuran said, don't feel pressure socially, don't feel pressure academically. And the one thing that I want to point out, and I want to get to Nara as well, because she's currently living that experience. For those of you that are thinking that you might not want to go to college after high school, I mean, if Malia Obama can take a gap year, so can you. The point is, there are, Silicon Valley is hiring kids that don't go to college. There are careers out there that you don't necessarily have to go to college. And now, parents on this panel, I am not advocating for kids not to go to college. I just want to be very clear about that. But I do want to emphasize that there are trade schools and there are careers, new and emerging careers in data science and other areas where kids can go to a boot camp and learn something and start a career versus taking 4 years in college and going the traditional route. And I think we as parents now have to kind of open up our mindset and teach kids what we're teaching at Fearless around, your emotional intelligence and life skills that are going to prepare you for life, right? I want to talk to Nara about how she's sort of feeling 1 year in, and then I want to get into sort of, Kuran and others have now graduated from college, and what did college teach you or not teach you getting into the real world, right? And so those are things that we also want to focus on. But before that, Nara, what is would love to hear your answer to that question. Did high school prepare you enough?
I would say a little bit. So it was helpful, definitely. I feel like, but I go to a really intensely rigorous school academically. So I feel like, high school prepared me as much as it could have, but I still have a long ways to go. But starting college in the middle of the pandemic, I did go in person in the fall for my first semester, but it was hard to meet people and, feel engaged in my classes, especially because most of my classes were on Zoom, even though I was in person. I didn't feel like I was getting to know my professors or my classmates and making friends, aside from, people who I lived with.
Yeah.
So that was definitely the hardest part for me.
That's a really good point. There's a really great podcast called Post Corona. And one of the things that this podcast talks about is, for the longest time, colleges thought that they were offering knowledge transfer and this certification that was enough. They were charging all this money to give you that. And what they didn't realize in this pandemic was, everybody was going to college for so much more than just going to a class and getting that knowledge and getting that certificate at the end of the day. And so you are going there for the experience, right? And it's all that experiential learning, and you're, collaborating and in teams and doing group projects and, getting, arguing in with a professor, or, kind of, now showing your ability to kind of communicate in that way against authority or with authority. So, I think colleges are also kind of scratching their heads saying, what else can we do differently for kids that are in college, right? So that's something also to consider. But moving to my second part of the question for Miranda and Emma and Kuran, do you think college prepared you for the real world? And I know Kuran, so Kuran landed his dream job, right? So Kuran, why don't you talk about sort of the job, your current job, and then I know that Miranda and Emma are going for their masters, so a little bit different path, but I'd like to kind of hear discussion around that.
For sure. Yeah, so for a little bit of context, I'm working for a venture capital firm in New York City, focused a lot on software and technology. I love the job I have. I love the people I work with. I really don't think that I could have been happier kind of coming out of school in any other role. And in terms of kind of if college prepared me for it, so I'll start first in terms of kind of like classes. When I think about the classes I took, I think they were probably as well aligned to what I'm doing as they possibly could have been. A lot of them were finance focused. A lot of them were actually entrepreneurial finance specific. And I think I learned a good amount from that. And I think that kind of gave me a kind of good head start jumping into work. But honestly, I don't know that, the classwork that I took was really like super above and beyond and kind of set me up super well for success. Not that it set me up for, failure or anything like that either, but I think it was just one of those things where it's very different seeing something in a classroom than putting it into practice. And I think whether you're looking at business or whether you're looking at psychology or whether you're looking at really anything, that will probably be a pretty big difference between what happens in a vacuum of a classroom and what happens in the real world. And there are colleges that actually kind of work to bridge that gap, whether through experiential learning or through internships or through lab work or things like that. When I think about kind of the rest of what college gave me, and Dipali, as you said, a lot of what college is giving is really an experience. I think that's what set me up well for success. a lot of group projects, being able to work with people, kind of being part of different clubs and organizations on campus. And I think what it teaches you is not only kind of how to work in like a semi-professional sense and work with the people around you at work, but it also kind of teaches you how to interact and make friendships and bonds, and at the same time be able to kind of maintain friendships from different places in different settings, right? So now that I've moved into New York City, I have friends from home back in high school, I have friends from college, I have my roommates, I have people from work that I'm friends with, right? And oftentimes it can be overwhelming to try and maintain so many different relationships with people that don't actually even know each other often. But I think that's a lot of what college gave me was, that experience much more than the actual education itself. And I think, as Miranda said, the education itself, you can often get at whether it's online or from a textbook or, from like a YouTube video, right? Accounting, for me, accounting is accounting, right? The rules of accounting haven't changed much in so many years. But the experience of going to class every day or every other day in that case, meeting people, working on group projects, things like that, that was what was really, really special.
Awesome. Miranda, anything else to add?
I agree with a lot of what Kuran said. I think that in terms of material, a lot of what it is, at least in my experience, is you're given a lot of reading. You do the reading. That's the content. That's what we're going to be discussing in class. So yeah, you can learn what you're going to be learning in college, I think, in a lot of different environments. But it's the experience that I think truly helped to shape me. Do I know if it prepared me for the real world yet? I'm just now starting to dip my toes into the real world, so I feel like I'll get back to you guys. But I think that it really helped to shape who I am as a person. And I think that's what's really important. It helped me to become a critical thinker, I think, is one of the biggest things that I always considered myself to be a critical thinker, but college really expanded that, and it helped me to question so many different things. And I think that it's important it taught me to question everything and not take anything at face value, which I think is really important.
Really good point. Yeah.
It taught me to be a great communicator, how to work well with others. It taught me how to speak well and interview well because I had to. And it really helped to shape my interests. Like, I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had that experience. I had a lot of different experiences, not only academically, but in terms of extracurriculars that I had in college. And all of that was really, really important, I think, to my professional development. So we'll see how it all pans out. But I think
we will be following you. So we will make sure. We're almost at time. There's just two more things that we'd like to ask. One anonymous question came in. So whoever wants to tackle this, one of you, what's a good GPA to have? Someone is asking that. So who wants to take that one?
I mean, good is a relative word. It really is. I mean, a good GPA, I mean, to keep my scholarship, I had to have a GPA over a 3.0. That was what I needed to keep my scholarship money. I went over that, but I have friends that make a 3.0. I have friends that have a 2.8 and they're very happy and got a job after school, and it's all good. So good is subjective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. All right, so guys, I want to go around the room. Last question. What advice would you give your high school self? And I'm going to start with Nara.
To my high school self, I would definitely say, like I was saying before, things will work out. Your expectations might not be what is going to happen, but you're going to be happy with the result either way. And I definitely feel like going to a smaller high school, there was a status quo that you kind of had to maintain and follow, but going to a bigger college, you can be whoever you want to be, explore whatever you want to explore. And you don't have to worry about what other people are thinking of you and, fitting in with what everyone expects.
Awesome. I know Miranda was thinking, so I'm going to go to Emma. What advice would you give to your high school self?
I would tell her that you are exactly where you need to be.
I love that. I love that. Karen, what about you?
Just don't take life so seriously. It's a really interesting and transformational time. Applying to college, going to college, being a freshman. Enjoy it. Like, have a good time, meet new people, try new things. Not everything is going to be perfect day one, and know that, and don't try and make it so, because it just won't work. Like, if you try and make it perfect, it's just not going to happen. Life's going to take you where it wants to.
Love it. Miranda, what about you? High school self, Miranda.
Just give myself a little bit of assurance and say, like, you got this, and everything is going to work out just as it should, and it'll be great. So like Kuran said, to just sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank my fearless mentors for being on this panel on a Saturday afternoon and graciously giving us your time and amazing sage advice. So kudos to you guys. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And to the attendees and anyone else that's going to be listening to this recording, we are here to be your personal cheerleaders and encourage you and offer mentorship and utilize us as resources. And everything is going to be fine, and you'll always be able to find answers to your questions. And don't take yourself too seriously. And just as our motto is, be fearless. So thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.